So welcome to Market Research 2020. This is an introduction into the concept of market research. I'm Neil Wilkins, and I'll be taking you through some thoughts and some ideas and some slides, which will introduce you to the concept of market research. This isn't a deep dive into particular market research techniques and tools, but I'll be putting into context how each of them fit together and how various ideas and thinking behind market research can help you in your everyday marketing role. For a deeper dive into any of these techniques, I'll be sharing with you some of the tools and names of platforms and online services that you can use and have a look at as we go through the second half of this particular presentation. So one of the key things that we need to really encounter as we go through market research is to really kind of understand the whole scope of what we're talking about. Now, when people say research, I think they often assume things like focus groups, where people sit around in a room and discuss a particular concept, maybe a new brand execution or a new product. And it's very much a subjective view from a panel of people who are likely to be the consumers of that advertising, that campaign, that brand, or that product. So often people think of research in those sort of terms. They also think of research in terms of finding some way of segmenting a particular market. And that might be because the organization wants to break into a new market, so it does a bit of research to find out what's going on in the market, identify some trends, looks at basically finding opportunities and where it might be able to match some of the values and the services and products that it offers. So it will be kind of scoping and scaling a marketplace. We also can look at research that basically satisfies an intrigue that we have over how well we're performing. So this could be, what do our customers think of us? Often, how satisfied are our customers of the things that we do? So things like customer satisfaction surveys are obviously very interesting and relevant in this space. We also might want to know really at a sort of a granular level, what kind of awareness do certain types of people or certain individuals, certain target customers have in the brand that we offer, and how far we're actually reaching. So some of these things that we're looking at here are very much a subjective view, and research helps us in a subjective sense, but also some of the things will be more objective. So the kind of the financials, the pricing, that kind of thing. You know, what is an appropriate price for a product or service like ours? You know, will that be consumed? Will customer be satisfied and see value? So we need to research all these kinds of things. So we're seeing a bit of a mix here between the kind of softer stuff, the subjective kind of feeling kind of approach, and the harder, sort of more objective, tougher, if you like, sort of financial numbers. And in many ways, what our role in marketing is to kind of figure out, well, what's the most important? Much larger organizations and big multinationals often have a small team of researchers who are constantly working 24/7 in-house to identify and feed into the organization this kind of information. And of course, you know, they are very much tasked with doing that. For most organizations, though, this is something that happens either through commissioning an agency or some kind of third party to go away and do this sort of thing, and or it's something that happens on a sporadic basis, just when there are gaps in knowledge and information. So it's a very broad subject, and it comes at us at varying times, at varying depths and details. And for most marketers, it can be quite a confusing space. And when you see how confusing it is, when you really can't see the wood from the trees, and a lot of the stuff that you see will be sort of banks of data, you know, pages and pages of numbers, lots of kind of anecdotal evidence that comes from a whole variety of places. And often when we're tasked with, can you find out this? Could you research that? Come back to us with an answer on this particular subject. Often we're kind of faced with this big opportunity to go and sort of put a little bit more kind of sense, if you like, to some of the decisions that are being made, maybe back up a strategy that's being sort of created, and maybe go and prove actually how well our marketing and communications activities are doing. But it's very difficult to know where to start, because there are many different sort of pockets of information and the sort of waves of data that can come at us when we open this door. So there are two different types of starting points really when it comes to research, and we call these primary research and secondary research. I really like this particular quote or sort of definition, if you like, which was by Geopol, which says that primary research is information gathered through self-conducted research methods. Secondary research is information gathered from previously conducted studies. In other words, secondary research, if somebody says, oh, can you go and do some secondary research? What they mean is, can you go and find something that somebody else has already created? So it's almost like it's secondhand. It's kind of where we're second to the party. Whereas if somebody says, can you conduct some primary research? What they mean is, can you figure out the right questions, the right kind of data, the right people who we need to be asking, and can you go and start this from ground zero and build this up from the basic sort of level of here's your question, now can you go and get an answer? So they are quite fundamentally different in terms of the approach, but they're also very much both driven by the original brief and the original question. And this is a really important starting point. So whether you decide you're going to go off and conduct your own research, primary research, by yourself and for yourself, or whether or not you're going to go to a secondary source, in other words, some kind of research paper or something that's been assessed and analysed and researched for a particular marketplace and gathered by somebody else. Often it is going to be a balance between the two. So a lot of the time, it may well be that you look at secondary research to begin the journey. So you go out and you do some desk research, which is basically you sat at your desk looking through the internet for papers, for evidence, for reliable sources of content and information that's going to allow you to build the context, if you like, to answer the question that's been posed to you. And then generally then it's a nice idea then to say, well, okay, now we can do a deeper dive on this subject and this subject. Let's go do some primary research to take it to the next level. So for most organizations, that's kind of where they're starting. So they start at the point of secondary research, so they go and see what the information is already out there, because often that's quite easy and quick and efficient to gather because it's already been done. And then they decide then that primary research is that next level down. So they're going to focus in on a particular topic or a particular subject and just really take that one to really kind of sort of drill down and actually make that thing happen. So for most organisations, this is how they will do it, and I would certainly recommend that probably is quite a good starting point for the way that you begin to shape the research plans that you have. Now, of course, that is research that begins with a question. Now, for often the scenario that we're in as marketers is that we want to have a sort of a continuous view and a continuous kind of trend watch, if you like, and some kind of wider listening of the environment or the market or the sector that we're in. So this is what I would term as trend research. So we've sort of got this continuous kind of watching for trends, watching for opportunities, keeping our eye on the sector itself, maybe watching and doing a little bit of research into our competitors, seeing what they're doing well, seeing what they're missing out on, and really having this kind of finger on the pulse. And I think that would be a phrase that would really sort of apply to this trend research. So secondary research is gathering and capturing stuff that's already been researched. Primary research is where you drill down into very specific topics and you're going to start the research process yourself. And then there's trend research, this wider listening and continuous market sensing. Now, of course, if you take all those three things, you think, yeah, but hold on, I've got a day job to do. I'm a marketer. I've got to be sort of, serving customers. I've got to be looking after sales. I've got to be doing campaigns. I've got to be maybe sort of involved in new product development. There's a whole bunch of things going on. I haven't got time to do research. Now, what I would say is that actually one of the fundamental things that you have as part of your role is, yes, you do have all those things to be doing, but I would also say that part of your role is to be the voice of the customer into your marketplace, or the voice of the customer into your business, and actually reflecting a collective kind of view of what your customer needs are, and in fact actually the needs of all of the stakeholders for your organization, and reflecting those back into any kind of marketing activity or sales activity or customer support activity you do. So to me, having your finger on the pulse at all times and gathering market intelligence by listening to your salespeople, listening to customer service people, being at events and conferences, reading publications in your sector, watching some of the sector websites, particularly the media and influencers, keeping a finger on the pulse of the thought leaders, getting in touch with some of your suppliers so that you see that wider kind of supply chain opportunity of gathering and capturing information so that you can turn it into intelligence that helps you make better decisions as to what's a high priority, what is important to you. So for me, this list of things is something that, whilst you might not be, a dedicated market researcher, as a marketer, you really should be doing this pretty much every day. So market intelligence really, if we're going to be the voice of the customer, is at the forefront of everything that we do and everything that we focus on. Now, when we start thinking about market intelligence, if we're in a commercial sense, and in fact, even if we're sort of public sector or not-for-profit, it is still important because indirectly we still have competitors in terms of, competitors for the attention of the people we're targeting. But very, very much makes sense in a commercial environment is that as we look at the marketplace, what we also need to be doing is very much keeping our finger on the pulse of the competition. So looking at the competitors themselves and saying, okay, we need to sort of be watching what they do because they may well be stealing a lead on us. They may well be missing a trick. And so if we identify something in our market intelligence that we can see none of our competitors are doing, well, is there an opportunity there to gain some competitive advantage? So part of our role, in addition to the market intelligence, is competitor intelligence. There's nobody really better positioned than us in marketing to have our finger on that pulse as well, on an ongoing trend basis. So ResearchGate defined competitor intelligence as the process by which we gather information on competitors and the competitive environment, ideally using this in our decision-making and planning processes with the goal of adjusting our activities to improve performance. Now, to me, that's a really, really nice way of describing this, keeping our finger on the pulse in our viewing and our watching and our sensing of competitor activity so that we can continually adjust what we're doing, both at the decision-making and also the strategic level, but also the tactical level as well. So if we see them doing something interesting or different, what are we going to do about it? Again, part of our role as marketing to be making those recommendations. And they carry on by saying the objective of competitive intelligence is not only to help firms make sense of what competitors are doing, but also to take initiatives to preempt the competition. And again, that's really important. Yeah, it's fine to see things with hindsight and after the event, but actually what we're trying to do here is to spot those trends so that we can then preempt activity and actually make things happen prior to it happening so that we can get a strong strategic game at all times. So market intelligence gives us that wider perspective. Competitor intelligence gives us that view of the competitive activity and our position really in that sort of competitive environment. So by this point, you're probably thinking, oh, crikey, now there's quite a lot for me to be doing. And I didn't realize actually that I should be doing that on a day-to-day basis. Plus, obviously, the secondary and then primary research when I need it, when I'm planning or when the line management come down to me and say, hey, we need to find out this information. So where do we start? Well, often the starting point or the best starting point to keep some sort of control over questions like this and the ongoing view is to dip yourself into a process. Now, I've got this quite simple six-step process that allows you to basically construct a plan, if you like. And you can keep this plan at a very high level. It doesn't have to be at a level that is quite sort of complicated and difficult. This can be at a level where you are just literally answering a few questions and actually putting a few lines in for each of the questions within this process. So the six-step process is that number one, we've first got to define the problem or opportunity. So being really clear, what are we actually wanting to find from our research? What question are we actually trying to answer? So it's not good enough to say, oh, what are our competitors up to? Let's be a lot more specific than that. It's not good enough to just say, well, what's the biggest market opportunity we've got right now? Well, let's be more specific and say in what region, what area, with what product or service, or against what particular customer persona that we're targeting. So get really, really quite smart with the problem or the opportunity that you're defining for your process. Then number two is developing your research plan. So this is all about putting into effect the timing requirements. So what kind of resources do you have? Do you have a budget? If you don't, you're probably looking at some desk research and maybe some free secondary research. If you have a budget, maybe it's appropriate to conduct some primary research too, where you're going to put some focus groups into operation, or you're going to commission some kind of third party to scale up the amount of data capture that you need to identify and answer your problem or your opportunity. So developing your research plan. So that is all about, what resources do you need, what kind of budget, what kind of time is available to do this, and what kind of things are you looking to answer. Step three then is going out and starting to collect relevant data and information. The key is in that word relevant. When you go and start a research activity, what you'll find very, very quickly is that a whole host of information and data and intelligence starts to come in your direction. This is not necessarily very helpful, so constantly go back to the original question and say, look, I could capture this piece of information, but is it relevant to help me answer the question? The answer is yes, it comes in. If the answer is no, you filter it out. Step four then is analysing the data and reporting the findings. Again, reporting back against the original questions. The only time I would say you could come outside of reporting back only against the original questions is when you've identified a really big surprise opportunity, or something that's really going to take things on from where you are right now as an organisation. So if there's something that is just too good to miss, or that's a giant opportunity in terms of innovation or market opportunity, or something that is just a real surprise but in a very good way, then obviously you would factor that in. But otherwise, analysing the data and report the findings back only against the problem or opportunity that you've been asked to research. And then the fifth one is about putting research into action. Research is only as good as the decision making that comes from it. Research is only as good as the change and the continuous improvement that you've set out to achieve. So make sure that you don't lose sight of the fact that the research itself is only an enabler, it's not the end game. It can often be the case that you sort of look into this and you think, oh, I've done my research, so I've done my job and everyone's happy, but nobody actually used it. But hey, I did my part in the process. Part of the responsibility of your role here is to make sure that the research is put into action. So that's either a decision is then made, or that the strategy is changed, or that you've adapted your tactical activities. Something has to happen as a result of this, otherwise there really was no return on investment. And then I would always put a sixth step in the process, and that is repeat. Because if you've got a process here as part of this sort of six-step plan that you've created that really works, it gathered the right kind of data, you reported it back, everything was really good, it affected change, then why wouldn't you use this as a template for the future? So for me, the sixth step in this is, okay, you've now got a legacy plan, you've got a legacy process. Let's use that again. So next time somebody asks a question, you can say, okay, I can just do a quick, simple six-step process. I've got the template for that now because I've shown that it works. I've shown that it gave good ROI and it made a difference to how we do business. So now I can do that again. And so the next time you do it, you'll find that obviously it's a lot slicker. You're not daunted by a big question and just this great big spectre of the idea of doing a big research sort of activity or project. You actually know how you're going to do it, and you can then do it quickly and efficiently and get those answers and get that change made. So by following that process, you allow yourself the luxury then of starting to then plan ahead the kind of research that might be useful for you. Now, when you start to look at all the different types of research, and right at the start of this webinar, I just identified a few things that you can use research for, but actually when it comes down to it, and when you look into this as a topic, there are literally hundreds of different ways that you can actually use market research, and that you can actually use research to create a real kind of understanding of kind of both where you are, where you're going to be, but also then this continuous improvement that we were talking about. So one of the things I like to do is to actually put things into a bit of a framework. And often I sort of would fall back on something like, say, SOSTAC. So situation, objective, strategy, tactics, action, and control. And actually use that to then put different types of research into different parts of the planning process. So for example, if I want to know the situation or the context to open up maybe some strategic opportunities for my organization, then the things I might look at from a research perspective would be market intelligence, maybe pricing research, competitor research, and probably employee research in all its various guises. And that, to me, then will set the scenario, will set the context for my plan. I then add in, if I'm using something like SOSTAC, and I'll just use that as an example here, I then add in relevant objectives and strategy, because of course those would come from the findings of that research. So if I know my market, if I've done my pricing and competitor research, and I know the organization that I have and the resources because I've done my employee research, then I can set smart objectives for the organization, and I can set a reasonable and achievable and appropriate strategy. So the situation research, the market intelligence, pricing, competitor, and employee feeds into the objectives, so it makes them real. It feeds into the strategy, so it keeps those relevant and appropriate. Then I'll take the strategy and think, okay, if the strategy is the 3 to 5 year view, let's have a look at that first year of those 3 or 5 years. And so I'll then create a tactical plan based around tactical research. And for that, I'd be probably looking at some customer experience, because that is very much more at a sort of a tactical level. What kind of experience do I give? What kind of experience would I like to give to the customers? Well, we've got some research we can do there. There are tools available, and I'll show you those in a minute. We also might want to know from a tactical level, because we have existing customers, what kind of customer satisfaction are we seeing from the various products and services that we offer? So at a tactical level, customer experience and customer satisfaction would fit as research opportunities. Then at a very much a campaign or sort of action plan level, again, SOSTAC would say it's situation, objective, strategy, tactics, and then action plan comes from your tactics. So at an action plan level, what kind of research approaches would we have? Well, we can review research conversation surveys. We can review management. We can look at reputation. We can look at data. We can do polls and surveys. We can look, if we run events, we can look at live event polling. We can maybe even gamify some of the research and data capture that we do. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that we can look at here at an action plan and then literally a campaign sort of level. So there's a lot of research activity we can do at that level. And then the final step in a planning process, say control, there are lots and lots of different tools that we can use to research, and report as well, of course, some of the more obvious sort of outputs from our activities in marketing. Some of the activities and tools that we'll be looking to do will be real time. Some of them may well be automated, because it may well be that we are providing product and service at scale to customers at scale, in markets at scale, and that we simply don't have the resources to do that manually, so we want to automate. So there will be tools that we can use to research on an automated basis. Like website analysis and all the social reporting and insights come into this level as well. And so it is then as well about adding in our dashboard and our reporting to kind of almost sort of capture all of the things that we've done to this point in our plan and the implementation and execution of our plan, and then actually using some of these tools, and I'll show you some in just a second, some of these tools then to actually be able to report back to the business how things have gone. So the best way of approaching the mindset of kind of what research and what sort of data and information capture can do for us is to say, okay, these are simply tools. They're not the end game. So unless we're actually going out and developing the next, best practice customer satisfaction tool or platform, then it's just a tool. It literally is just a tool. It's not the end game in itself. So think of these things as opportunities to capture data in your kind of armory. Think of these things as being things that you can actually put into the mix when you actually capture information to show and demonstrate and provide evidence for the ROI of the activities that you do. So yeah, certainly at the situation level, a lot of these things are going to be for setting the scene in context, but certainly at an implementation or campaign level, and for most of us day to day, that is kind of what we're up to at a marketing sort of sense, then these are things that will help us and enable us to actually show and demonstrate the ROI. So one of the important things then is to understand, okay, so what kind of tools are available to us? Well, if we're looking to set up the context or the situation, we can certainly research our market intelligence with things like Alexa, Crunchbase, Talkwalker, Owler, SpyFu. There's a whole range of different tools that you can actually go and explore. And if you put .com against any of those names of what I've been mentioning there, you can go and see any of these. Most of them do have free trials and previews, and you can go and have a little play and see which ones of those tools would help you to gather the appropriate market intelligence so that you can start to inform both your plans but also to look for opportunities. Pricing and competitor research tools, certainly things at a very, very simple level like Google Alerts, because Google Alerts allows you to track competitors, very much sort of trend and insight watching, sort of listening to the market. Pricing research tools can include things like Pricebeam and Checkmarket, which give a sort of more holistic view over how your market is set up and how sort of pricing appears right across your marketplace. I always put sort of employee and think about sort of employees as one of your sort of key customers and stakeholders actually when it comes to planning, because often you're not going to be able to do your marketing without the support of your peers. So understanding, the customer satisfaction, not customer, the employee sort of satisfaction rather, and actually how your employees are feeling about marketing and sort of tracking and sensing, how well you've been briefing them to be involved in the campaigns and the like is also really, really important. So getting a general sort of consensus and view as to kind of how well marketing and potentially sales and potentially customer service is doing from the employee perspective gives you that nice rounded holistic view of the situation that you face. When it comes to your more sort of tactical research, so having used the situation tools to create and advise your objectives and your strategy, you move then into tactics, as we said earlier. So from a customer experience management angle, there's a lot of tools available. I mean, I'm literally just scratching the surface when I mention things like CloudCherry, Recollective, Qualaroo, Qualtrics. A lot of these are for assessing and helping you to manage the experience that you give, the user experience, the customer experience, end to end through your customer journey. And a lot of these are based around customer journey. So they allow you to kind of give yourself an opportunity to really understand the kind of experience that you're giving, not just from your perspective as you look at what you provide, but certainly from a really sort of general perspective over the experience that you're giving. And of course, leading on from that are the typical things that marketers often sort of get engaged with, which is customer satisfaction. I'm not going to go into NPS or Net Promoter Score, but a lot of these do use the Net Promoter Score theory, and that's well worth researching if you haven't come across that, which is a sort of a generic benchmark for customer satisfaction, just how satisfied your customers are based on sort of averaging out and looking at the whole kind of spectrum of how they feel about what you give. Ask Nicely, Cervicate, Client Heartbeat, Gainsight, a whole range of these are available to you. So it's well worth having a little exploration around some of the customer satisfaction research tools, because if you're not using one of these, it's a very, very important way of gauging kind of where you're at right now, setting a benchmark for your tactical activity. And then as you implement and execute on campaigns and projects, then you can measure the before and after. And A/B testing in research is obviously really important. Then when it comes down to the more detailed level of actual campaign reviews, you're able to look at a whole range of different tools that allow you to really sort of deep dive into things that are going to be sort of really useful, not only in terms of the delivery of what you do, but also in this continuous improvement that we were talking about. So you can have really sort of an interesting sort of perspective, if you like, of a lot of the reviews. These are customer reviews that are coming through in the broader sort of social sphere, but also coming through on your website. So Testimonial Monkey, Reputology, Get More Reviews, Broadly rather, are all individual platforms that allow you to select the review, the most relevant, capture and gain a really good sort of sentiment analysis. So how are people actually feeling about the activities that you're doing and the service that you're providing. You can also go into a review of conversations and reputation management. Again, this is all about sentiment. You know, the sales of product and service is just one element of what marketing is about, because in the longer term, what we are is about managing and protecting the reputation of our brands and our products and services and our people. So using conversation surveys and reputation management tools in the marketing research mix allows you to keep that finger on the pulse and again be watching for trends. Survey Sparrow, do you notice a lot of these actually are based around birds? It's interesting. Survey Sparrow, Dove Interview, CrowdPurr, Birdeye, there's a whole range of tools that you can use here for reputation management. So again, go and have a little play with some of these, put .com after any of these names, and you can have an opportunity to go and explore, getting a much deeper insight into your reputation and the kinds of conversations that are happening. Often we as marketers jump straight into doing polls and surveys. It's one of the very, very quick wins that we can see, and particularly if you want to get a good sort of grasp on how a particular campaign is performing in pretty much real time. You can actually use things like SurveyMonkey, which is probably the most well-known one, but also Survey Gizmo, Poll Everywhere, Survey Legend, Key Survey. Again, the list is endless, but these are an opportunity to be monitoring and measuring the kinds of things that we want to make individual day-to-day decisions around. And we can create our own little individual forms. Typeform is a very simple and generic sort of web-based tool that allows us to create on the fly very, very quickly little questions that can be answered very, very quickly. We might have to incentivize, but sometimes we can get some good feedback very, very quickly through our website on how we're performing, or answers to questions that we need to answer to inform our campaigns and tactics. And if we do need things in really live format, we can do live event polling. A number of these tools are available now. Slido, Swift Polling, Pigeonhole Live allow us to get instant feedback at events and conferences. So if you're providing some kind of real world sort of face-to-face conference, event or festival, this allows you to take digital feeds back in so that you can actually feel the sentiment of the audience. You can actually rate your speakers and the like. So it's really, really interesting to have that live feedback and blend that in with the longer term, more kind of solid research as well. And getting further into the detail of things like gamification is probably in the coming years going to be much more interesting. A lot of the tools that we've talked about are quite sort of serious, quite heavyweight, quite detailed and quite complex. But one of the principles about the relevance of your selection of these tools is to think, am I going to be able to actually get people to complete the survey? Am I going to get people to actually answer the question? Am I going to get people to them? And often the concept of gamification, so you can use things like Feedia and Outgrow to just explore how you might be able to gamify and make a little bit more kind of interactive and pleasing and entertaining your capture of data. So I think that is going to be a growing one, which perhaps we'll explore in the future. And then when it comes to the final end of the research journey, as we're using all these tools for planning in the right place, in the right sort of part of your process in marketing, we need to think about control and measurement and reporting. A lot of the time we're going to be looking to automate where we can, if we're going to be doing some research to report back to the business, if the research data that we're capturing is at scale. So things like quick surveys cool to allow us to automatically capture feedback that we need to inform our programs. We're also going to be naturally looking to do some website analysis, and for that, obviously, things like Google Analytics can come into play here. That is a research tool, certainly from your website's perspective. Things like Nibbler allow you to do a slightly deep, or at least from a free perspective, it is a very deep sort of drill down into your competitor website. So I certainly recommend, if you haven't done that, it's a very, very good instant sort of competitor research tool. And things like Hotjar as well, giving the use of individual web pages by Hotmap, sort of profiling of each page on your website. All of these things come into play to give you that deeper feel and that deeper level and context of the reporting that you're going to do. And then the role then translates over to you to create the right kind of dashboard, so you can report from each of these tools that you've been using. You can report back the most relevant and important information, importantly, that turns your data into decision supporting intelligence. So I really, in my marketing, live by the mantra of turning information into intelligence. Often the people I talk to will sort of criticize me and others in marketing for talking marketing speak. So it's our responsibility as marketers not to be talking about the information that we've gathered, but to actually interpret that information and turn it into intelligence. In other words, highly valuable decision supporting material that can be shared across the business and with our stakeholders. So it's then about appropriately sharing and reporting this information and doing it ongoing, not just the one time. Even if we're asked to do a little piece of market research right now, even if we're asked to research a competitor because they're doing a particular campaign or activity, this is setting the scene for us doing this ongoing, not just one time. Because ideally, really, we're looking here, as much as we were in the market sensing, we're looking for trends rather than snapshots. So it's really, really important to remember that these things are trends. They're not just one-time activities, because all we're doing is we're just seeing that snapshot in time. And we're never quite sure from the information whether that is increasing, improving, or decreasing, declining. So we need to be watching this on a trend basis rather than just a snapshot. And ultimately, what we're trying to do here is to help intelligence be the lifeblood of the organization, so that we're making decisions based on evidence and fact, not just on gut feel and anecdotal information that comes into the business. So let's get intelligence to be the lifeblood of the organization. And by having the mantra, turning information into intelligence, we at least stand some chance of actually getting there. So those are the things I wanted to sort of share with you to give you the context of kind of where we're at with the whole subject of market research. I mean, obviously, one of the really important things when it comes to market research is that, you know, you're selecting the right kind of research tools to answer the question. So hopefully, by putting it into the structure of that SOSTAT planning framework, you can see where certain tools can add the most value. Now, I'm not saying that one size fits all by any way, and it certainly is down to you to then kind of translate what we're talking about here generically into something that's useful for your organisation. So I've noticed that we've had a few questions come through as we've been talking for this, and we've got a few minutes just to cover some of these. I've been asked for, can I recommend an agency for research? I'd rather not do that. I'm not sure that there's an individual agency that would answer all of your questions, to be honest. I mean, that's probably the starting point. I think the best option would be to go for scoping out precisely what questions you need answered, and then maybe then talking or sending an email to our research specialist at Cambridge Marketing College, Steve Bax, and you can get hold of Steve at steve@baxinteraction.com, and he will then be able to guide you in terms of the right and most appropriate research resources, should we say. So it might be an agency, but bearing in mind the questions that you ask, it might not. There may be some stuff that he can point you in the direction of so that you could self-serve. So I can't recommend a single agency just to answer, you know, all of the questions. And I think what it'll be in reality is it will be a mix of primary and secondary. It's probably also going to include some trend and insights and listening, and then maybe a tool or two to help you answer a question at the particular planning point you are in your marketing journey. Another question is, how am I best to report my research? Is it strategic or is it tactical? Well, that's a really, really interesting question. I think to think about that question is probably a mix of both, but I would think the best starting point, and often this comes into two sort of phases, certainly from my experience, I found that this kind of works at two levels. So is if you go back to the organization and report back against your key performance indicators. Okay, I think if you've got any doubt and you've got a load of intelligence to report back, I think the starting point, the best starting point is to think about, all right, my key performance indicators, what are they? What are the key things that we measure and monitor? And have I got intelligence to support those? Because the beauty is after you've actually done your research is you've got probably on your laptop or in your database, you've got all the answers you need when further questions then come out. So if you do an initial presentation of kind of where you are against your KPIs, the audience then, be it your management, your board or whoever, will then come back and say, okay, that's fine, but could you also tell me about this, this and this? And that's where then you can go back and almost do like a phase 2. And I've often seen that that is the case. It's very unlikely, I think, that you're going to be able to give, the ultimate presentation back of your report unless the question that's been asked is so specific that you've been really tight all the way through the process. I think the reality is going to be that you're going to have to do just a general introductory presentation and report, which is based around KPIs, and then invite back further questions. So say, okay, what else would you like to know? I've got a lot of intelligence here. What else would you like to know? And then go back with a phase 2. So I think, structure it like that. I've got another question as well, which says, do you trust infographics? Oh, that's a nice one. Yeah, we haven't mentioned infographics. So infographics, I think you could argue, will come probably from the secondary research. So it's when you got the initial question comes in that you need to answer, and you go out and you do a quick little sort of scoot around Google, and one of the things that will pop up, which probably will start your journey of further thinking and building a research plan, is going to be that you're going to see some infographics. So the question is, do I trust infographics? I think yes, to some extent. Obviously, it depends on the source. I mean, if it's a very reliable source, somebody like Gartner or Forrester, and they do produce a lot of kind of market and sort of very, very high level and tech and sort of societal infographics, and I would say probably because they're very well researched, they're heavily resourced, and they're probably, you can argue, peer reviewed, but they will be pretty reliable source. A source that you don't know and where you don't know where the data's come from, it might look very pretty infographic, but it might not be quite so reliable. So if you decide to go down the route of using infographics a lot, then what I'd probably recommend is that you take a very broad view of them. So maybe rather than just relying on one, you try and get an average from 3 or 4, because that will help you to, sort of be reliant on the fact that if one is completely out, then that'll have been averaged out from some of the others. So it's about kind of due diligence, really. It's about not relying on a single anecdotal piece of evidence, and even if it's a big sort of research company, even at a global level who produced it, that is still one view. So I think it's probably worth just averaging out. So do I trust them? Yes, I do, but on an average level. So I'm looking again for trends. I'm not going to just sit there and say, oh, look, there's 20% in it. I thought it was 10%, therefore I'm going to now make big decisions on that one number. That won't be the case. It will be that I will probably then look for further evidence and further clues that it is the right thing to go with. So thank you for those questions. Hopefully you found this interesting little 45 minutes delve into market research in 2020. This is kind of the current scenario, current situation. If you have any sort of particular market research needs, then more than willing to explore those with you. So if you want to, and you're watching this on Catch Up, if you want to pop those into the message thread below, then I will certainly do my best to point you in the right direction. I'm not a market research specialist myself. Obviously, I know market research because I've used it for some 30 years in a marketing sense, but I do know a lot of people who are very much specialists and can do deep dives into particular questions that you might have. So if you let me know, and I will hopefully endeavour to do my best to answer your question. So this is Neil Wilkins. This has been Market Research in 2020. Thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to catching up with you again on a webinar very soon.